So welcome everyone. This is Next Practices Weekly. We meet every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. Once again, we've got a great guest today that we'll get to in just a moment. But first, the preliminaries that I always walk through at the top of the call. If you're new to Next Practices Weekly, we are I4CP, the Institute for Corporate Productivity. We discover the people practices that drive high performance. We're your human capital research firm. We'd like to focus on what high-performing organizations do more than their low-performing counterparts. And we define high performance by revenue growth, market share, profitability, and customer satisfaction. And when we do our quantitative research studies, we take a look at those four areas and sort of block off the top quartile of organizations and the bottom quartile, and then compare what practices are they doing, whether it's in succession, leadership development, talent acquisition, DE&I, total rewards, whatever the subject is that we're studying. We like to look at what high-performing organizations do so differently than low performers. We're a member-based organization, so a special welcome to all of you that are with member companies on the call today. Great to have you with us. You see here just a small sampling of our member companies, ranging from really large companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Ford, Accenture, and others, as well as some that are on the smaller side. We've got some organizations that are only maybe 1,000 or 2,000 employees at this point, but growing fast. We've got a cohort of unicorn companies and so on. Also span across all market verticals, all industries. You see we've got healthcare, high tech, manufacturing, and much more. So welcome everyone, whether you're with a member organization or you're joining us maybe for the first time. My name is Tom Stone. I'm a senior research analyst here at I4CP, and today I'm joined by a special co-host, Colleen Hunter. Welcome, Colleen.
Thank you. Great to be here.
You're one of our senior directors in member services. Great to have you with us today. You'll be leading the conversation with our special guest in just a moment. But want to remind everyone that this is a weekly call. Next Practices Weekly, as the name indicates. We'll have another call next Thursday on the 14th, where we'll have Darcy Pearson from Oshkosh Corp. The week after that, we'll have Kelly Elliott from Delta Airlines. We're also expanding globally, and so you see the event coming up on the 13th. That's directed for our friends over in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. We've got another one coming up for our friends in APAC region as well. Those ones are on different days, different times of day as well, that are more appropriate for those time zones. So share that with your colleagues. If you're a global firm and have colleagues around the world, they can attend those sessions too. One thing I wanted to note is that we will be having a pretty big presence at the upcoming HR Tech Conference in Las Vegas, October 10th through the 13th. You can use the promo code I4CP and still get $300 off your all-access pass to that conference. So it's about a month away. If you're interested in that, we will be there with both a pre-conference workshop and a mega session covering culture, AI, and HR as our topics from some of our recent studies. So hope to see you there at what is the largest conference that focuses on HR technology each year in the fall. All right, at this point, I'm going to turn things over, as I said, to my colleague Colleen, and she's going to introduce our special guest today.
Awesome. Thank you. It is a real privilege to be able to introduce Rocki Rockingham to you all today for two reasons. Okay, on a personal level, I see a lot of Michiganders on this call. And I'm a Michigander, and my father worked for a GM, and my mother or my grandmother worked for Oldsmobile, and Rocki got her start in labor relations at GM in Michigan. So we've got a lot of Michiganders and Midwesterners here today. So that's always fun. And secondly, everyone knows the GE appliance brand. I mean, hopefully you have plenty of those in your household, and the organization has been around for a long time. And the focus today is really around a lot of the organizational transformation that GE Appliance has gone through since their purchase in 2016 by the Haier Group, which is a Chinese-based multinational company. So a lot of organizations, I think, in this call will find a lot of the transformational work and insights from Rocki very relevant to work they do in the global environment. So Rocki can introduce her background better than I. Her HR career spans 3 decades, and she hasn't just been in HR, she's been in other parts of the business. So without further ado, Rocki, why don't you take us through about your background and then really talk a little bit about GE Appliance as an organization.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me today. I'm thrilled to be here. Rocki Rockingham, as Colleen has said, and just a little bit about my background because we don't want to spend too much time here. But I've worked for many companies, as you can see here. I've had really a great hybrid career. I haven't spent my entire career in HR, although my foundational training was certainly in labor relations. But I've spent half my career in human resources and the other half in global philanthropy and communications, government affairs. And so I've been able to do a wonderful hybrid, I think, which has really given me the opportunity to look at total business impact and really be able to get involved in deep business issues across many organizations. And so, as you can see, I've been in many multinational companies across the industry, but have worked in many different functional areas, but really focusing on human capital, people resources, and human resources, and how we can really make the organization better and build on that. And so my focus across my career really has been in terms of transformation of different teams across different industries. And that's what we're focused on today at GE Appliances.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rocki. Let's hear a little bit more about your organization, the size that of it, and also how you support the businesses.
Great. Well,
at GE
Appliances, you know, the way we work, the commitment to our country, our investments in our community, and our engagement with customers. You can go to the next slide, Colleen. Our philosophy, at GE Appliances is a simple philosophy that guides our shared ambition. And our philosophy is that we come together to make good things for life. And it's sort of our tagline. It's who we are, and it's how we do it. Go to the next slide. Just to talk a little bit more about our commitments at GE Appliances. We continue to, on an ongoing basis, look at who we are as an organization. We are about employing about 16,000 plus in people globally, with the vast majority being in the U.S. Today our appliances are in half of all U.S. homes. I hope many of you have them. Our goal is to serve every family in the country. We contribute to local economies in 46 states. Beyond North America, we're a global leader through our parent company, High Air Smart Home. High Air is the #1 appliance company in China and is sold in more than 160 countries and regions worldwide. They've grown throughout the world through acquisitions and organic growth. In addition to GE Appliances in the U.S., they've acquired Fisher & Paykel in Australia and New Zealand, Sanyo in Japan, and Candy in Europe, just to kind of give you a broad base. You can go to the next slide. Each year, our U.S. operations continue to grow as we invest in the company to serve our consumers and customers. To meet the growing demand, we increased output in the U.S. In 11 U.S. manufacturing plants and microfactories, and are building more than 2,500 units per hour across the U.S. Through our robust nationwide delivery network, we're able to deliver an appliance every 13.85 seconds. Yes, we have timed it and tested it to more than 90% of U.S. homes every day. So needless to say, we do a lot of delivery, we do a lot of building, we recycle more than 100 plus million pounds of cardboard, wood, and plastic. We procure more than 3 billion parts. We ship more than 25 million parts. We manage more than 16 million calls in our call center. We are a massive operation who touches a little bit of everybody's life across the industry. And we proudly do that. And we proudly continue to want to get closer to who our customers are and where we want to go.
So as you mentioned High Air and basically the company it is, and that it is also grown through acquisitions. If we go to the next slide, you talk about one of the key challenges that you're facing at GE. help us understand the context between the high air. Like, how has that changed your culture? How has that changed your priorities? The other thing I'll mention is we're going to speak a little bit about your CEO, Kevin Nolan, toward the end of the call, but he was your CTO, I believe, before he became your CEO. So that probably also, he's probably got a very strong technical slant or innovation slant. Speak a little bit about how the culture has changed since high air made the purchase.
Well, it's interesting because, I like to call us a 100-year-old startup. So we are a company that's embedded in deeply rooted in technology and understanding of how to build what we do. And so the thing that we've been able to do since our acquisition in 2016 from High Air, we've been able to go on this journey of transformation really, and to use the philosophies that could help us to elevate to the next level from where we were. We know how we've done things in the past, but oftentimes, it can be difficult for companies to make a transformation and to look forward and to be nimble enough to be able to really move forward. And so for us, our challenge and our opportunity we felt was, we need to lead the change that we want to go through. In order for us to transform, we can sit back and wait for other people to kind of push us and see what the industry did, or we can sort of get in and make those adjustments ourselves. So you can go to the next slide. One of the things that High Air really brought to us was this philosophy of Rendingi. And the philosophy talked about, and you can go to the next slide also as I talk through what that is. It really is talking about, it's a management model that talks about an entrepreneurial spirit, ecosystem thinking, and zero distance. So how do we create this innovative thinking within the organization and sort of, take barriers away from employees and have them really think about how do you connect different things across industries and, adjacencies across the business, and create zero distance between employees and customers, between the company and our customers, between us and consumers. How do we reduce the amount of space there and create zero distance as we continue to build our business? And so as we look forward, we had an entrepreneurial focus. In 2017, we adopted this sort of new consumer focused operational strategy, which we called micro enterprises, which is a part of the High Air philosophy of Rendingi. And these micro enterprises are independent business units that are grounded by local markets and consumer connection. So what do I mean by that? I mean, each micro enterprise resembles a startup. And so what we did was we divided our business into these multiple startups where our employees are empowered to take and to make their own decisions among other innovators and partners and users. So as part of zero distance philosophy, these entrepreneurial micro enterprises enable GE appliances to grow closer to our customers and our owners and to be more responsive to evolving the needs of consumers. So this strategy enables our micro enterprises to pivot quickly, to modify their approach, to seize new opportunities, to create value for consumers. So whereas historically we kind of looked at the business as a total, we now have the opportunity to put it into these individual businesses and really have these businesses become agile and be able to move forward quickly. You can go to the, and so as you can see, our micro enterprises operate at the speed of market. So we've got clothes care, refrigeration, smart home solutions. We've got cooking and dishwashers. We've got water heaters. We've got parts and accessories. So by creating these micro enterprises, we've now been able to create these markets, these individual sort of pods that are businesses that operate on their own. So First Build, for example, which you see a picture of that here, is a collaborative marker space located on the University of Louisville, here in Louisville, Kentucky, on their campus. And it's sort of an innovation engine for us. It harnesses the power of a global community to makers to co-create and launch what's next in home appliances. Guess what? We know that we don't have all the answers. We don't have all the answers. And so in order for us to create zero distance, we invite the community in. We invite our consumers in to give us ideas, to talk through what are your needs, what are the things that you're looking for, which allows us to then innovate and be creative and co-create with the people who are using the products that we make. We're equipped with state-of-the-art fabrication shop. We have a micro factory that's in First Build, and we have outside-in development approach. The team is empowered to rapidly develop. So as you can see on the top, on the right side of this particular slide, those are actually mushrooms. And so we sort of did this crowdfunding, crowd building. Who knew that mushrooms that people really liked and wanted to grow their own mushrooms? Well, we we found out it was a thing, and so we sort of connected with partners. We had one of our engineers who was interested in mushrooms, created this machine, and it took off. We did crowdfunding for it. It became a sensation through YouTube, and so it's just one of those things of where consumers said to us, "Look, can we create a solution for this? Can we do this? How do we create this?" And so we've been able to really, through partnering and creating that zero distance, to determine, what's next in home appliances, what's next in something creative. We also have created now a second first build marker space, which we call Co-Create, which is in Stamford, Connecticut, so that we can tap into another market and do the same thing in a micro factory and build the next product. You can go to the next slide.
So you speak a lot on getting closer to the customer, and really I hear a lot of design thinking in this work, around putting the customer first and having them co-create with you. How does this translate to HR? So how does it translate to how you expect HR, your staff, to show up with the clients and potentially with customers, if that's the case?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, as you can see with zero distance, we talk about, it's our commitment to strategically grow closer to our customers and owners. And that also applies internally to our customers, our people, our managers across our businesses. And so from an HR perspective, we want to make sure that we understand that we are partners with our organization, that we are sitting with our micro enterprise leaders, that we're sitting with our platform leaders, that we're sitting with our functional areas, and we are working within their businesses to understand what their needs are and able to immediately reply or respond to what those needs are as a partner, as opposed to having 2 or 3 layers. And so I have HR business partners sitting in every part of our business. And as those micro enterprise operate as entrepreneurial units, they also have their own HR representatives and leaders who can then carry out the tasks that they need. What happens when the distance between company and consumer is zero? When the distance between the idea and the innovation is zero, there multiple things can happen across the business. When there's no distance between it, there's incredible understanding and trust. When there's no distance between one person's idea and a whole team's innovation, it's game-changing disruption. We want to continue to disrupt the market. We want to continue to disrupt our workplace. When there's no distance between the people who make the company great and the neighbors who welcome a company home, then there's tremendous collaboration and pride. We want to continue to build a collaborative line between our customers. We want to build pride in our employees, and we want to continue to build this game-changing disruption across our industry as we continue to build our business. Achieving zero distance. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in with a couple of things. One, just a reminder for the participants on the call, this is a very differently structured organization, and I'm sure you might have some questions. So feel free to use the chat to ask any questions of Rocki today. I'll be watching out for those and curate those. And I was wondering, just to help us a little bit with the context, because something like this structure is so new for all of us listening, and it's very interesting. Obviously, as you said, a 100-year-old startup. I noted that in the chat. I think that's an interesting description. You're obviously a very agile company, even while being 100 years old, very innovative. How many micro enterprises are there? Can we get just a couple numbers? And what's the average size of them? I get a feeling that they probably range quite a bit, but are they generally like 10 to 15 people or more like 100 people? And how many total micro enterprises do you have?
Well, if you go back a couple of slides, Colleen,
Sure.
on the one that's entrepreneurial focused to serve our owners. Yes.
Tom is running our deck, so.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tom. Yeah. So if you see on the left of the slide, these are our micro enterprise groups here.
Got it.
So these are all our micro enterprises. And so when you see like clothes care, refrigeration, cooking, dishwasher, those are our large micro enterprises. Okay. And then so smaller ones, as we introduce new products and opportunities into the market, those are smaller ones. So for example, water heaters, filtration, small appliances, those are smaller micro enterprises, which have smaller groups. So our larger enterprises, for example, laundry, for example, could be as large as, 100 associates.
Yeah.
Whereas a smaller micro enterprise could be as small as 30.
Right. And so for those really
Yes.
small ones, you might have an HRBP that maybe handles multiple, or is it always a one-to-one relationship?
Well, interestingly enough, what we've tried to do is, because smaller, micro enterprises, because they have fewer people, what we want to do, because we still are launching them and we want them to be able to have scale, we also assign a business partner to them who individually focuses on their business. Because at the end of the day, what we don't want is, we don't want them to get lost in the sauce.
Yeah.
And so we want to make sure that they have an opportunity from a scale perspective to be able to move forward. And the only way to do that is to have a partner who sits with them and focuses on them the same as a partner does in a larger business enterprise.
Well, we've already got one question, so let me surface it here from the chat from Andrea. It's a great question. Can you share about how you do internal mobility and development within the micro enterprises and between them? So do you have a common language on things like jobs, skills, work, or does that kind of stuff vary from one part to the next?
We do. We have common job skill language when we create job descriptions, and we're still working on that process to make sure that we can sort of create common pools of jobs across the business. So if it's a PMO role or if it's a project management role, we try to make sure that they have similar requirements. The difference with micro enterprises is generally depth of experience across the breadth of the business. And so that's usually the differentiator across the businesses. And so as you can see on this particular slide too, if we go back to that slide again, Tom, the one with entrepreneurial focus, the micro enterprises are supported and powered by platforms. And so this is much more traditional across with matrix businesses. And so these platforms, as you can see, still are integrated into these micro enterprises to help support them. That way we don't have duplication of efforts across all our businesses, and we can continue to be streamlined as we grow and put the focus on products and not so much duplication of people across the business. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, no, that was great. And obviously HR being one of those key platforms.
That is correct.
So when we if we can go to the our HR purpose there, Tom. So we talked about zero distance, getting closer to the customer, allowing each micro enterprise to evolve on its own with the support of HR, finance, procurement, etc. Talk a little bit about building a culture where how matters. And one of the things I think we would love to hear about is we always talk about key behaviors. What are the behaviors that you want to support within the business? And so I'm curious how HR supports identifying talent in the business and those behaviors, promotes those behaviors in the business, rewards and or recognizes key behaviors like innovation, agility. I mean, those are very, broad words, but it's hard to get specific. So how does your HR organization support identifying, rewarding, and recognizing and developing these type of behaviors in the business?
We talk all the time about where our behaviors show up, whether it's in hiring, whether it's in enabling people to look for other roles and opportunities, creating zero distance, unleashing potential of employees, whether it's through training, whether it's through developing, seeking feedback, being active learners across the business, an environment where we create for growth with our employees, whether it's recognizing certain behaviors or key moments that happen. When we look at our HR purpose and when we talk about this across our organization, my motto has been for this business to say that how matters. How we do things, how we build our culture, how we pay attention to the details of our people strategies matter across the business and how it impacts to make sure that we have the right people, the right attitudes, the right potential to be able to build these micro enterprises to create what we need to for our consumer with zero distance. We try to elevate the employee experience as we go through. Because we're driving, transformation across our business, we want to make sure that we have optimal organization effectiveness as we design our organizations. We want to make sure that we have the training that our middle managers need to be effective leaders. We want to make sure that we, are purposeful in bringing forth opportunities for people to create, to be innovative, to have think tanks, to have environments where we have them set up so that employees feel like they can collaborate and understand more of where they need to go next. We like to bring operational excellence to all that we do across the board. We want to be accountable. We got to be credible. We've got to answer questions if people have questions. We have to be bold with our ideas. We have to listen and understand that value added input is important across the organization. We don't have all the answers, but we want to make sure that we collaborate with our customers to make sure that we are bringing to them what they're looking for. Because, at the end of the day, the people build the culture and the people make up the culture. And so we want to be able to unlock those behaviors, of working together, of collaboration, of understanding how we do things, of listening, so that as we build our culture, we're able to all look in the same direction and continue to collaborate and integrate and build a great company.
Before we move on to the next two pillars here that make up your HR purpose, I just wanted to call out, and I just added this to the chat. You used the phrase think tanks. That's not something that most organizations have as groups of individuals that maybe span across sort of normal teams in the corporate hierarchy. Companies often have ERGs and BRGs, of course. They often have things called communities of practice, perhaps, that are sort of role-based. But I gather these think tanks are more focused on creativity, innovation, maybe span across different units, different micro enterprises even. So just kudos to you for leveraging a term that we hear out in the broader world. It's obviously used in the political realm and other areas. But I've never heard that phrase, think tanks, used inside of an organization, and I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And
And we use, ERGs are really important part of, what we do within our organization as well, because guess what? That's how we fuel a lot of internal feedback and information. And so ERGs really allow us to have to be inclusive across a diverse platform of employees who think differently, who see things differently, and to be able to really give input and weigh in on how we do things and how we move as an organization. And so it's really an important lever for us within our organization.
I'm curious, and there is a question in the chat that I'll also speak to or ask you about, but you had mentioned the importance of ERG. Do you have an example that's top of mind? And if you don't, that's fine. An example top of mind of where an ERG has had an impact or influenced how you think about the employee experience or a particular group's experience? Do you have an example to call upon? And then that relates to a question that Karen asked around how do you, what are some things you do to elevate the employee experience? What does an elevated employee experience actually look like?
Well, think about it. So the ERG question I'll take first. So a perfect example is if we're doing, how you would do focus groups and you may bring in external people to look at, to give you ideas about a product. Guess what? We can use ERG groups, and we do. So we can bring an ERG group together if we're looking at tapping into a particular community. So let's say we take our Asia Pacific ERG group and say, hey, we're trying to develop a product for this particular market and this. Come in, let's do a focus group. Let's talk about what are the things that you think are important to this market, to this community and so we can start there, because guess what? Our customers are our employees, and so they sit right with us. And so what we've done is we've tried to get innovative and creative about how we really give our people a voice and give them a voice in the innovation and the development of what we do next. And so that's an example of how we do that. And when we talk about elevated employee experience, it can be something as simple as access to benefits. It can be something as simple as, how do I ask a question and get a response? It could be something as simple as, if I have a concern about, mental health. Does my company care about me? And how do I get the information that I need to be able to operate within the organization that doesn't compromise who I am? And so for us, in order for us to elevate that experience, we have to make sure that we anticipate those things and that we can supply those needs for our employees on a basis. I have to say that I have a tremendous, HR team who really focuses and who proudly bring forth, top-notch support for our associates across our organization. They are subject matter experts in what they do, and whether it be in Workday in trying to help you understand how do you navigate through personal information or your pay information that you're looking for, or if it's through trying to navigate through what your benefits are. But they are really focused on making sure that we bring an experience to employees that allow them to seamlessly have access to the things that they need so that then they can focus on what they need to focus on to get their jobs done.
Excellent. Thank you. There's another question in the chat around, this is a lot of, culture transformation, business transformation, while you have pressure to have, to optimize the, operational excellence, or to make sure that your HR services can scale, across the business. So Praveen asks around change management, and how do you actually, what specifically do you do to arm or support your HR organization, and therefore then through your clients navigating this level of change? What types of support tools or tactics do you use?
Well, it's interesting, and change management is a hot topic for us right now. And so I've recently brought in a new person on my team, organizational development person. And one of her focuses will be on change management in terms of how we now elevate and move to the next level of making sure that as a function, as an HR function, that we understand what change is and how it impacts our organization. And then we can help our organization understand, how do we continue to elevate through change? How do we continue to grasp, this is what's happening as we are transforming, because it's like growing through transformation. And so guess what? You have to learn as you go along. It's like you're learning to drive a car while you're driving. And so as we go forward, we are really focusing on how do we maintain balance across the organization. One of the things with change management that I think has slowed us down a bit, because we're moving very quickly, is the fact that we find ourselves in a period of working where we have 5 generations of people in our organization and we've not been here before. And so when you think about, baby boomers were historically the largest group within our organization. And so now we see that millennials and Gen Zs are the largest group within our organization. So guess what's happened? Our organizations have shifted. And so now, before we focused our organizations in a certain way and we move differently, whereas now the needs for millennials and Gen Zs are very different. How they work, how they think about working, how they think about digitization, how they want to proceed and move things, how they look at shortcuts differently versus baby boomers who want to go through the whole process, and millennials and Gen Zers want to get to the end of the sentence very quickly. And so we've had to shift our organization and how we think, because who's working for us is starting to look different. And so as we do that, we really have to look at how we do that. And so change gets redefined along the way. And so we're having to manage through that. And I have to say, we don't have all the answers and we haven't got it all figured out, but we're working through making sure that we give every category of person a voice. And in order for us to do that, we have to understand what their questions are so that we can respond to those in a way that's meaningful. And so we're very intentional about how we do that.
Okay. I hope that answers the question. One of the pieces on the change one is what happens, you mentioned a bit about attitude, and is one of the key things that you look at. And then when I see Praveen's question, it's also what happens if someone can't let go of the old ways, the old ways of doing business. And so how do you support an employee that is struggling with the way it used to be? And I do like to be, I like to have an end to end. And now you're asking me to take these shortcuts that might be innovative. How do you support employees through that transformation?
Well, I can tell you that's a very real thing, because at the end of the day, we've sort of banned the phrase, "This is how we've always done," because
Okay.
because what we're doing is we're forcing people to think differently. And so you have to say, nobody can say that phrase. Nobody can say, if I ask you, well, why are we doing it this way? Instinctively, you always want to say, well, this is how we've always done it. So because you can't say that now, it forces you to think differently about, oh, I wonder, well, where we're doing this, it really does not make sense. And we really can think differently about how we do it. And so guess what that does? It creates a light bulb for people to make them think differently about how they're doing tasks that they may have done for years, but now they think about it differently because they can't fall on the fact that this is how we've always done.
Right.
Can we enforce that rule in broader society, like with government and other things as well? That would be great.
Yeah,
That,
but it's a
that would
very
get my vote.
specific tactic, right? You can't say this word. I mean, that's, if we think about how to change behavior. So we have another question in the chat, and I think this will kind of move over to a little bit of your HR services part. So we know that you have HR business partners aligned to the clients, to the micro enterprises, and that every micro enterprise has an HR business partner assigned. And then one of the questions asked is, how big is your HR organization, like size? And what I'd like you to, maybe if you can speak to not just size, but and can you tell us a little bit about, you have a talent acquisition, you have talent management, kind of how are you structured, and how big is your HR org, and do they all sit locally? Are they regional? Can you speak a little bit to that?
We do have some who are local and regional. We have some COEs. And so like our HRIS and talent acquisition and our comp and benefits team and our medical team, they are all COEs. And so they work across the span of all business. And then we have HR business partners who sit within each of our micro enterprises and within our businesses. And then we have plant locations that are in different places, and we have full teams who sit in those who align directly with functional teams that support different micro enterprises. So we have a supply chain manufacturing team that supports across the business. And so when you look at our total team, we've got more than 100 associates across our business, but our business is, as we talked about earlier, it's 16.5 across the globe. And so we really try to make sure that we put enough support in so that we can cover employees, sort of a business partner per, less than 20 to 30 employees, so that we can pay attention to the needs of our employees.
Wow. So what I heard there, if I'm summarizing, is that you think about, per every 20 or 30 employees, right around, you have an HR business partner assigned. So there is a bit of a population staffing model. Okay, because I know that that's something we often get asked from our members, are benchmarks in terms of size. So that's very helpful. Last question on this slide, and then Tom, I think we can go to the next slide right after. I am curious. So yesterday, actually, I4CP supported a flash call, and the flash call was really around the HR business partner scorecard, or is there a scorecard that HR business partners who are really close to the business can hold themselves against? And so what I might ask just more broadly is, can you give us maybe 3 to 5 specific examples of measurements that you hold HR accountable to? So how does HR get measured in terms of effectiveness? What kind of lagging or leading indicators do you look at, and does your staff look at?
I think that I don't know that we call it a scorecard. I think we probably call it a competency model. It's probably much more closely aligned with. And so what we try to do is every year we try to look at, competencies that we feel like are important for our HR associates across the business. So whether that be communication skills, whether that is negotiation skills, and it depends on what your role is, whether that be training or development skills in terms of how you communicate with middle managers versus senior managers, and so I think we sort of develop a competency model together so that we can understand what are the key things that we're looking for and how are we going to measure whether or not we're doing a good job supporting our micro enterprise leaders across the business. For example, so when we talk about zero distance, we talk about, so one of our competencies is about provocative thinking. Well, what does that mean? So when we talk about provocative thinking, we say, well, when people ask you for ideas or when you're looking for new ways of doing things, you should be provocative in how you do. So go to something that you would think we could never be able to do because you want to go as broad as you can from a provocative perspective to get to where you're trying to go. And so we really challenge our HR associates to be creative. And so an example of that is HR automation is a perfect example. We've got a team on our HRIS, part of our HRIS team, who's created HR automation for, any repetitive systems that we have. So things that were manual, that were on Excel spreadsheets, that employees do all the time, they've created all these bots so that it's easy to do these things. You can create them and move through the organization. So that's a perfect example of how a team got together, they created a solution and then integrated it across our business.
Wow. Yeah,
And
that's
I know they've been
excellent.
able to come and talk to some of your members about that.
They have
but it's
actually.
been
They
great.
have. Yeah, they co-sponsored. I think it was your your systems folks. Even I9 validation. They did a ton of streamlining around validating I9, and a lot of members had questions around that. So they absolutely. Speaking of innovation, I think, Tom, we can go to the next slide and then also take questions. But you mentioned AI, and I know recently we held a session with your HR leadership team on AI for HR. And while a lot of your team's already innovative in there, I'll mention that Felix Martinez, who runs your talent acquisition strategy, was interviewed by one of our researchers on how you're leveraging AI in the talent acquisition space. And so we'll see some outcomes of that interview at some point in the near future. So tell me tell me about the organization's use of AI, specifically HR, and then how do you support then the business's evolution in that area? And then Tom, after that, I'll move it over to you for some of the other questions that we mentioned.
Well, it's interesting because Chat GPT became sort of a buzzword across everybody's lips across the world. And so what happened is it started this groundswell so quickly that, we wanted to make sure that from a company perspective internally that we were able to, harness the excitement, but at the same time understand that, we've got personal information and data that we need to make sure that we keep box around and that people don't get overzealous about with using it. And so our IT organization was able to sort of create a proprietary GPT internally for us and create a playground so that then we could go into the playground and then be innovative and creative in how we create applications that can be used for our business specifically. And so we've put together teams within HR and challenged them to go and figure out, okay, what can we do differently? And so and Felix will talk about just from a talent acquisition perspective, I challenged the team to say, why do we need so many people doing so many interviews? Can we use AI to help us with interviews? Can we use AI to go through the thousands of resumes that we have? And so we've been able to narrow based on what we're looking at, and we can use AI to do that. And so there've really been some really great applications that we've been able to use to help us to streamline how we look and search for talent. And then once we get that talent, how we help move them through our systems. And so we've been able to figure out some things with onboarding. How do we help people to learn about the business quicker? And so it's been great because as you guys know that the more you put into your AI system, the smarter it gets. And so it's able to really help us to build a platform, a knowledgeable platform so that people can call on and go in and put in a keyword and it'll populate and tell you where to go look for information and create an ABC menu for you to be able to go and get information within our organizational ecosystem. And so it's been great.
I just want to note, as I put in the chat, that we've done a study recently, a major survey on AI for HR, and there will be a full report coming, I believe September 21st, I think, is the launch date for that report for our members. But as always, there'll be a brief with some of the key findings available for the broader public. So definitely by the end of this month, watch for those coming very soon. Those are some great examples, Rocki, and I know we had a great call with your team on all that you're doing with AI recently. One of the things when you and I prepped for this call that you also said is a major focus for you right now is retention of employees. Retention is something that, with the so-called Great Resignation, hit a lot of firms about a year ago. It's gotten a little bit less at some places, but it's still, with a tight labor market, of great concern for many companies. What are you doing to really hone in on that big challenge right now?
It's interesting because I was looking at a report from the labor market that said that there are 10 million jobs out there. And there are 6 million people available to work.
Right.
So that means we got a gap, right? So there's always going to be 4 million jobs that are available. And so what that means is, guess what? We're always going to be competing for labor. We're always going to be competing for talent. And so one of the things for us from a retention perspective is we've sort of been introspective from that standpoint and said, hey, what's our point of difference? What makes this a great place to work? We've got a moniker that says we're a great place to work, but what really are the specific things that make us a great place to work? And so we go into the details, and we look at, what are the conditions that employees get to come back to when we have people come back to work, because we build stuff. And so, after COVID, we had people come back to the office. We had them come to work because we've got 6,000 frontline workers here who worked all the way through. And so as we brought people back, we wanted to make sure that we had an environment where they felt like they could collaborate with their coworkers, where they felt like they had the freedom to, where they could be, it's a creative environment, where they felt like they have access to opportunities from a career perspective. And so we feel like those are things, flexibility of schedules. We feel like those are things that employees feel are valuable to them. But it takes us listening to employees to understand what are the things that are important for them in their lives as they're spending the majority of their time in a workplace, as much time in their workplace as they are in their personal lives.
Yeah, listening and always reevaluating the employee value proposition. I think in times past, 5 years ago, and certainly well before that, the EVP was something that maybe you re-looked at every few years, but now it's something that just needs to be organic and constantly paid attention to and adjusted.
It's iterative. Every day.
Iterative. I love that. That's a great word for it. Colleen,
Absolutely.
you had mentioned earlier that we wanted to ask Rocki, and so I'll do that now, about how she's able to work closely and partner with their CEO. Colleen, you and I both heard an interview with Gary Hamel recently of the CEO talking about this philosophy that the company's adopted from your parent company, Higher, and that was a very interesting interview to hear. So just love to hear, we often get this question, high-level HR leaders like yourself, Rocki, what's the relationship like with your CEO? What kind of support do you have? How does that dynamic work?
It is a really great relationship. It makes a difference when your top leader believes in what the organization is doing, and it's not just lip service. I mean, he's a guy who's walking the hallways, who's walking the plants, who's walking around talking to everybody, saying, "This is who we are. I believe it, and I'm doing it." And so at the end of the day, I mean, we have a really great relationship, and he and I are able to be really honest with each other and talk about, this is where we need to be better. This is where we're doing great. And this is where we can challenge ourselves to push further. The great thing about Kevin is that he challenges us every day to be better, to push in a direction that, allows us to really transform our business. It's very rare that you have a business where, an individual has grown up in that business historically, but has really been able to make a transformational change and take the business in a whole different direction. And he's that guy. He's technically savvy. He grew up in technology. That's how he thinks. But he will tell you And if you saw the interview, he'll tell you that he was a process guy. He was the guy that I need a process to do this, I need a process to do that. But once he got the light bulb moment where he realized that we have to do our business differently, and this is a way we can think about it differently. Once he grasped that and understood it, he's not looked back. And so he's really been able to help us to transform our business and continue to look in a different direction and become somebody very different. And so it's been really good, I think, as we're evolving as an organization.
We have put the interview in the chat just because it is external. And I found it so fascinating, to just see a leader talk about their own, as you mentioned, transformation. I liked when he talked about, well, I was looking for org charts. Where are the org charts? I need to understand where people are. And that's an old paradigm. Not that org charts are helpful, but that's an old paradigm. Like where do people sit in the org? And so that's another example of needing to be forward focused. I think, Tom, we had one last question. Is that true? Do you want you want to ask it?
Yeah. We've got time for at least one, maybe
Great.
two. We often like to ask of guests who are dynamic and interesting to learn from, like yourself, Rocki, because you're getting some kudos throughout the call today on the chat. You're probably going to get hit up with some new LinkedIn connections from this call. People always want to know, what do you look for people to join your HR organization? What specific traits or behaviors are you interested in? And also, are you finding any new talent pools that maybe across the organization or within HR that maybe you're focusing on?
You know what? I like people who are not afraid to take chances, people who are bold, who are provocative in how they think. And I like non-traditional people. Everybody on my team does not have a background of HR, believe it or not. We like new thinkers. We like people who don't, put themselves in a box and can only think a certain way and be a certain way, because what it does is it'll cause us as HR professionals and partners to get stale and not to think differently and not to think like the business. And so at the end of the day, I'm a product of that. I'm a product of somebody who's had training across the breadth of the business. And so I tend to stand back and look at it differently. And so that's my expectation with people who are on my team. I want to give you the freedom to be able to be thoughtful about how you do things. And I want you to think about that it's impacting you. At the end of the day, it's not just about instituting a bunch of rules and ideas, and this is the only way we can do this, because there are lots of different ways that we can do things. But I want it to be an iterative, fluid process of how we look at how we do business here. Because at the end of the day, how really matters. How we treat people, how we think about how we do our business, and how we move forward as an organization.
Okay, I have to ask one question around that, and then I'll turn it back over to Tom. So you just hired a new leader for talent management, and I'm being interviewed by you for that role. Can you share one question that you asked that person, the candidates, that gets to this about being more of a non-traditional thinker or someone that's provocative? What would be an interview question you might ask, or you did ask?
It's interestingly enough for me, and I ask this with everybody in that interview, I say, why are you leaving where you are and want to come here? What is it that you want to do differently, and why? Okay. Because what I want to know at the end of the day is, I know that you got the skill set. I don't need to know about your talent or whether or not you have the skill set. What I want to know is how you think. I want to know that you're not running from something to something, but I want to know that you're bringing new ideas, and you see what we're doing, and you want to continue to help us to transform and innovate as you go forward.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm ready. So that's good. Okay. We are all ready to innovate. That's what we, okay. So Tom, I think I know we only have a few minutes left.
Yeah. What I'd like to do is just note that your answers, Rocki, to these last couple of questions, Dina put in the chat that she loves your leadership style. That then generated 3 different emoji responses, some hearts, some thumbs up, and some claps. And we rarely see that in response to any comment here. We're pretty much at the end of our hour, so I think I'm going to close things out at this point. Thank you, Colleen, for leading this very great conversation with Rocki. Thank you so much, Rocki, for sharing all that you did. You're getting a lot of kudos throughout the call, and certainly here at the end in the chat. So thank you so much. It's been great.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. You know, we are excited and thrilled about what we're doing, and we're in the midst of a transformation over here. But I think we got nothing but upside, and we're excited about where we're going. So thank you for letting me share.
Great, thank
Excellent.
you.
Have
Just a
great
couple
day.
of final reminders for folks. These calls, the Next Practice Weekly calls each week, each Thursday, are available for recertification credits with both HRCI and SHRM. So if you have a cert and you need your recertification credit hours, just jot down the relevant program ID for HRCI or the relevant SHRM activity ID, and you can apply this time towards that. Also, finally, we at I4CP have a large conference for HR leaders every year in March. So March 25th through the 28th next year in 2024, always held at the Fairmont Princess in Scottsdale, Arizona. We don't have any vendors. There's no expo hall, so it's just peer-to-peer connections with great speakers. You can learn all about it at i4cp.com/conference. Once again, thank you so much, Colleen. Thank you so much, Rocki. It's been a great call today, and I want to wish everyone a great rest of your week. Bye-bye now.